Human trafficking is a $150 billion business. It's not a small business. Almost 22 million people being trafficked throughout the world.
26 seconds. 26 seconds.
I found out Airline Ambassadors was doing human trafficking awareness training for flight attendants. So I jumped on a plane, went to a different city, different state to attend that first training, and I met Nancy Rivard, president of Airline Ambassadors International.
I thought, well, I have to start where I am. I'm a flight attendant. Maybe we flight attendants can model a new way of traveling to make a difference.
For the last 3.5 years, Nancy, myself, and a few others have worked together to implement this human trafficking awareness program. And mostly we've trained flight attendants, but it's going broader than that to the airport travel industries.
And I said, dear God, how am I going to make a difference? I'm just a flight attendant. And my inner voice said, stop talking about it and start doing it. And it was then in 1993 that I made a decision to take one action a month that would directly help a child.
And I think because flight attendants are already trained to make sure the cabin, the aircraft is safe, we're really good at recognizing people coming on. If something doesn't seem right, we have that intuition.
The whole year we spent developing the first industry-specific training on human trafficking awareness, because airline and air crew can provide vital intelligence to law enforcement.
If we recognize that there's something on board, as a flight attendant, I've had to make 4 calls on incidents that I thought were human trafficking.
Our team of 12 people that promised each other we were going to remain aware on every flight correctly identified trafficking that month on 4 different airlines. And our first tip led to the bust of a pornography ring, saving 86 children.
And we have survivors of human trafficking that are part of our team.
We're now trying to get other airlines to actually write into their human trafficking policy that they're open to hiring and training human trafficking survivors.
When people see me today, they don't see me as, they cannot understand how I ended up as a human trafficking victim. My traffickers used coercion and threatened my family and threatened me with what they would do to me or my children if I didn't do what I was told.
Donna was on a flight, my dear friend. There was 2 people with a small child who looked very sick. And he was sweating profusely, and he looked like he was cramping and a lot of pain. But the parents didn't seem too concerned, and she asked one parent how old the child was, and she said 6. But the man said 8. And then they asked him the name, and the name wasn't the same. We think that they had put drugs inside the child and used the child as a drug mule.
What we do is, if we see something that seems like it could be a trafficking situation, keep observing, see if they have some of the telltale signs of somebody or a child traveling alone. Are they afraid? Do they not have all their belongings with them or appropriate clothing? Do they seem very hungry, like they haven't eaten or drugged even? Or are they under somebody's control?
It was a flight attendant that saw this little girl between 9 and 11 years old. She was sitting on a window. She looked scared. She was hungry. The gentleman sitting on the aisle seat was much older and did not look like her, did not look like he was even related to her, but she was traveling with him. There was a seat between them. The flight attendant tried to engage her in conversation. She wasn't allowed to talk to her. He wouldn't let her talk. She just looked out the window and she was scared. Finally, the little girl had to go to the bathroom. He followed her. He went with her. And when she went to shut the door, he put his foot in the door. And she said, "Sir, you have to let her close the door." And he said, "Don't tell me what to do with my property. I own her."
Somehow she had quick thinking to leave a note for this little girl in the restroom on the aircraft, and it saved the girl's life.
We had a case, a year and a half ago, where 4 unaccompanied minors were on a flight, girls, Guatemala, El Salvador, that area. 2 of them were crying. They had gone in the bathroom together. They were crying. And we got them together to ask some questions. All 4 said they'd been sold by their mother and they didn't know where they were being sent to. Well, it turns out there are 57,000 children that came across the border last year.
One of our flight attendants, who is based in Chicago, flew, her regular route is Chicago-Moscow. There would be a group of teenage girls that were all giddy and giggly and, laughing, and they're going to America to be movie stars and models. They barely spoke English. They told her that when they get to Chicago, they have to take a bus to New York. These are all red flags.
So she called the number into the hotline, and an undercover agent was put on the flight, and sure enough, the girls were being trafficked into the sex trade, and the undercover agent was able to stop a whole ring.
If you back up and look at what can be done, you want to notice things like if that person is not in control of their documents, their ID, that's a key. Bruising or on their bodies, or barcodes, but some tattoos are indication that that person is another person's property. They may avoid eye contact. And as flight attendants, we are charged to walk through the cabin every 15 minutes, engage in conversation. But you find somebody that looks like they are frightened or ashamed or anxious around anybody, especially people in uniform. They avoid eye contact. They give you a scripted story or inconsistent stories.
So we alert the pilots, first of all, give them every detail we can, including seat numbers, if it is on the aircraft, names of passengers, if we have that, descriptions, and what the situation entails. And then the pilots, they will radio ground operations, which then gets a hold of police.
One was a young lady who was answering a Facebook ad. She'd never actually seen him. She met the guy on Facebook and he bought her a ticket and sent for her. She'd never seen him before. That flight attendant asked her a few questions and red flags went up. He's actually not picking me up. His friend is picking me up. They traced it back and that individual was taking her to a studio to make pornographic videos.
About a year and a half ago, my husband was sitting in Pittsburgh Airport on the way home from one of our trainings, and he saw a trafficking situation. He saw a man tell a woman, a very scared young woman, "You're going to get on first. I'm going to be a few feet behind you. I'm going to be watching you." It was very clear it was a trafficking situation. So we've created an app that's free on Google or iTunes called Tipline App that does just that. It'll geolocate you no matter, hey, I'm in Paris, France. The information will go down to the law enforcement in France in their own language with pictures, video, and text.
And that app has all the resource numbers, hotline numbers, and the ability to report a trafficking situation right in your smartphone.
It's all aspects of the travel industry, but specifically with aviation because we move fast. Whereas buses and trains don't move as fast and cruise ships, aviation is a fast-paced industry. Traffickers are going to realize they've been exposed and they will be less likely to come forward and use aviation as a means of transporting victims.
We're not going to be able to solve this problem without partnership between governments, NGOs, law enforcement, and ordinary citizens.
Do something, say something, because you could be the key. You could be that missing piece to somebody else's freedom.